Hello and welcome to this very special telecast on NewsX. I'm your host Megha Sharma, and let's quickly bring into perspective of the events of the day. Behind me you can actually see the NewsX map of real China that we had released on 9th of June 2020. Now there is a version of the NewsX real map of China that is now doing the rounds. The former Army Chief M.M. Naravne has tweeted out this version of the NewsX real map of China depicting the expansionist tendencies of China since the 13th century that have led to it controlling parts of various areas that are surrounding China. Let's quickly take a look at this real map of China, and that's exactly what I'm talking about in terms of when this map was released. I just told you this map was released on 9th of June on NewsX 2020. So 3 years later there has been another map of China, a version of the NewsX map of China that is now circulating, that is now doing the rounds on social media. I'm going to quickly depict the various territories that China has been able to usurp since the 13th century. And I start off from the furthermost point in east of China, and this on top you can see the Chinese occupied Manchuria. You can also see this territory of Chinese occupied South Mongolia. And then if you take a look at the western side of China, and here you see the Chinese occupied East Turkestan, where Xinjiang is a city where the Uyghurs are fighting for their freedom but in futility. There is also on top left China occupied Parmir Valley, there is China occupied Sakshgam, there is China occupied Ladakh on the extreme west side, and then if you take a look at the southern point of China is Chinese occupied Yunnan, there is Chinese occupied Macau, there is Chinese occupied Hong Kong, and there you see this is the territory of Taiwan, which China now wants to usurp, and finding resistance from the people of Taiwan, which is being supported by United States of America and other parts of the world. So in totality, if you take a look and remove all these territories that have been by force taken control of by the Chinese, you take a look at this. This is what China is about. This is the China proper area. This is exactly what China is about, and these are the territories that it has then occupied. I'm going to now reflect on my screen the modified version or the variant version of the NewsX map of China, and here you see it, and this is a comparison that I'm looking to draw over here. So this is the map that was released, like I said, in June 2020, the NewsX real map of China, and after 3 years, a little more than 3 years, in September 2023, this duplicate or a version of the real map of China has now been released. It showcases exactly what we had demarcated as Chinese occupied Tibet, Chinese occupied Yuan, Chinese occupied Hong Kong, and this is of course they mark Taiwan. They also point Chinese occupied Manchuria, Chinese occupied South Mongolia, and this is the story that we are doing. We are going to remind our viewers that this was a map that was released by NewsX 3 years ago, and we are happy that there are versions of this map that are doing the rounds on social media, because it is important to disseminate this information. It is important to spread this information for people across the globe to be aware of this, and then put forth this message to their friends, to their relatives, to anybody who cares about what China is all about, and reflect its reality to the world is something that was the motive of making this map, of disseminating it, and we are finally able to tell you with very happy news that this act is now being conducted. This is happening in real time with this example that we have put forth for you. I'm going to in fact also showcase to you a number of appreciation tweets that had taken place 3 years ago when this map was released. So there is one gentleman who has come out and said he's taken the example of the real NewsX map of China, and it says as China continues on its expansionist mission around the world, NewsX has decided to publish the real map of China, which showcases all its territorial occupations and claims, and it says, well done team NewsX. Now this is the map. This has been put out on June 9th, 2020. Taking a look at another of these the map was again retweeted by Namgo Lagyari. She is a well-known Tibetan commentator, and she said that the real map of China with imperialist superiority complex who scoffs at Tibet's past of feudal system while they presently live under a dictatorial regime where the constitution allows Xi Jinping possess absolute control forever, and shouldn't I be laughing? A third tweet has been put out, and this gentleman is from Xinjiang. This gentleman is a Uyghur. This is what original China map looks like when you take out the countries occupied by them. Use in India manufactured products and don't give China the opportunity to claim entire India as part of their country. Another individual from Xinjiang, he's a Uyghur, and he says as China, and he's also gone about tweeting this map. And here is the real map of China, again an individual, again an influencer, he's gone and used this map to retweeted it and says the real map of China along with Chinese occupied territories, nations, courtesy NewsX, Rishabh Gulati. It illustrates the Chinese Communist Party's insatiable greed for territory and power. So now that I've showcased to you the NewsX map of China and a version of it that is doing the rounds on social media, I like to get my panelists to get on board this discussion and talk about this. It's good that this information is being spread, and it's important for the world to know. It's a happy position that NewsX finds itself in, because finally there are more and more people, more and more organizations that have used our map as an inspiration and come out and build their own versions of it. Let's start this communication with my panelists, and there is Tenzin Sandhu, who is a Tibetan voice. Tenzin, you are an apt person to speak about this. You have faced the Chinese expansionist tendencies and lost your land to the Chinese, and how do you feel that there are more and more people who are getting information, who are being made aware of the Chinese expansionist tendencies, and actually showcase what the real map of the People's Republic of China looks like when all these occupied territories are removed from its map?
You are absolutely right in pointing out that the real map of China is a colonial empire today. Just as the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji has said that China is an expansionist country, and China continues to behave like this. China tries to overpower other countries, at least tries to show that they are more powerful than others. Now let me tell you in detail. Real China was 9 provinces at the time of Yuan and Ming dynasty, and that's the first map that you showed. At that time, it was hardly 3 million square kilometers of land, and that's the original China, bounded by the Great Wall of China to the north and the mountains in the west bordering Tibet and to the South China Sea. That was real China. Now afterwards, the Mongols invaded China and ruled China from there, and China called it Yuan dynasty. Later, Manchus ruled over China, and Manchus ruled China from Peking, and from there they ruled China, and which looked much bigger. But that's not real China. The real China emerged as a free and independent country in 1911. And 1912, the Republic of China, ROC, was established under Dr. Sun Yat-sen. At that time, China was still 3 million square kilometers of land. The fake China that emerged happened only in 1949, and that too after occupying East Turkestan, Southern Mongolia, Eastern Turkestan, and Southern Mongolia, and Tibet. So 4 occupied countries. Now I will tell you, East Turkestan is 1.8 million square kilometers of land. Southern Mongolia is 1.2 million square kilometers of land. Manchuria is 84,000 square kilometers of land. And Tibet is the biggest, that is 2.5 million square kilometers of land. All of these occupied countries put together make 60% of China's landmass. And today China is saying or projecting that China is 9.6 million square kilometers of land, which is 3 times the size of India, which is India is 3.2 million square kilometers of land. So out of 9.6 million square kilometers of land of China, is 60% of that is occupied country, and that is Chori Ka Mal.
Absolutely, you're absolutely right. Joyita, getting a comment from you, we had been discussing this at length. This was actually put out 3 years ago in June, and actually you see these tweets that are scrolling and a number of debates. I think we've had innumerable debates on the real map of China. It's heartening to know that there are more organizations, more people who are replicating this map, because the idea of us putting out the map in the first place was for the world to know about this, to make them aware, and this awareness is gradually happening.
Absolutely, Megha. I remember it very well. In fact, it was one of Rishabh's shows where he had talked about, the real map of China, what it is about. And it was NewsX, in fact, the first channel to come out with that map of China, where it clearly shows, that inner Mongolia, what is called South Mongolia, Inner Mongolia, Tibet, Xinjiang was actually Xinjiang. Okay, and Yunnan, they were not part of China. And even if you look at the ethnic composition of these places, they are not Han Chinese. You see, one of the reasons why, and what China has tried to do is that, in fact, if you are looking at Xinjiang right now, what is called Xinjiang now, I mean, these people were of Euro-Asian descent. A whole lot of people, they had serious European connections. But then, and even for that matter, China tried to bring them into their, I think from the 18th, 19th century, they sent envoys over there and negotiated, and then by force finally got them together. Now the whole point is, and problem with China is that, and it's a serious problem, that China relies on spurious history to lay its claim on different territories. So for Tibet, it will say possibly maybe 1000 years ago, 500 years ago, we sent a letter there, and and in that letter, or they will dig out some, we don't even know how authentic that is, that okay, there is one tiny mention about Tibet, a part of Tibet being a part of Han China, maybe in some document 400 years ago, one sentence over there. So it shows that Tibet is Chinese. But by that logic, if we go by that kind of spurious logic, I mean, look at India's own history. Look at King Lalitaditya of Kashmir in the 8th century. He had his empire. In fact, he had his empire all over. So we can also tomorrow claim Tibet, but we don't do that. Why will we do that? I mean, Tibet is a sovereign nation. Just because the Chinese sent their army in and said that, sorry, that this is what, not even sorry, that this is, you are a part of us, by aggression, what they are trying to do even now, for that matter with India. That's the latest map that they have issued. It shows the whole of Arunachal Pradesh as part of China. But it's a fake map. So China is dependent on spurious history, spurious map, and ultimately what they try to do is that they use these references to to try and change, alter status quo,
Right.
as they did in Tibet.
Absolutely, absolutely. Major Sudhakar ji, I'll come to you now. Now, this is the expansionist tendencies of China. The fact that Mao Zedong and his policy speaks about how Tibet is the palm of China, and the 5 fingers include Arunachal Pradesh, Sikkim, Bhutan, Nepal, and Ladakh, and that's what the standard, or the quote-unquote standard map, or the latest map that has been released by China. But it not just limits itself to these 5 territories, but it also goes about usurping land of the ASEAN nations, Malaysia and Vietnam and Philippines.
Megha, good evening. Thank you for getting me to your show. I must compliment NewsX to be the founder of this map, which is actually making rounds in the social media as also otherwise. In fact, I would go a step further before I respond to your question, that the eastern portion of the map, which was originated by NewsX, which is showing a China proper, that map, which you are saying a China proper, had a eastern flank with a depth of almost about 500 to 600 kilometers from the eastern coast of China. That was not belonging to China ab initio. If you want to go to the roots of actual China size, go to Tang dynasty. Yes, I admire what Mr. Tenzing is saying. Ming dynasty should be rightfully the start point, but look back behind 10th century. The Sui dynasty followed by the Tang dynasty. Tang dynasty is the time when the actual shape of China, with a little tongue sticking out towards Xinjiang province, which you have marked, I think, beautifully, is the actual size of China. And if I remember in my research about 2 years back, which I had done for my PhD, the dimension of actual China was 1600 kilometers north-south by 1200 kilometers east-west at that point. This is the actual size. Whereas the actual size obtaining today, north-south distance is approximately 5,400 kilometers. Correct me if I'm wrong. It is just off the cuff. I'm trying to speak from my memory. And this is the north-south length. And the east-west is approximately close to 5,000 kilometers. From Kashgar to the east coast, going by the crow flight distance is 4,900 kilometers. They say 4,500 kilometers. This is the size. And I actually endorse what Mr. Tenzing has said. Not 60%. China actually was much smaller than what is being depicted. So, therefore, to answer your question, let me come back to the point and allow me to read out one text by a Chinese scholar from one of the very important books. I have been told not to refer to the book. The scholar says, it says historically and traditionally, this is stating the obvious. I am just reading out. An ancient Chinese belief that a subdued neighbor is a primary prerequisite for its stability drives the Chinese quest for dominance over its neighbors. China has consistently pursued the strategy of encroachment and negotiation throughout history by employing various dominance and expansion practices towards its neighboring states. This is nothing new. So it is not only India, but also the ASEAN nations, as also the South China Sea, as also Russia, as also Central Asian Republic. Talk about East Turkmenistan, Turkestan. This Xinjiang province, actually speaking, ab initio, it is to be called as Turkestan. Turkestan had 2 parts, the West Turkestan and the East Turkestan. What is Xinjiang today was part of East Turkestan. It did not. The border of India never lied with China. It is with the Tibet. If China is not respecting the sovereignty and territorial integrity of India, why should India respect the territorial integrity? We should take China back in historical perspective, remind the timeline and say, friend, this is what your actual size is. You are a country which is aspiring to become a global power by 2049, rejuvenate the Middle Kingdom. You better learn the meaning of rules-based international order. If you can't do that, it's no good shouting and pushing all strength, all asserting yourself by BRI, by all means.
Right.
So therefore,
Absolutely. Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni, now, how do we teach China a lesson? while the West continues to rake up the Ukraine issue, and they speak about how it is wrong for a country to claim wrongful stakes at a territory which is not theirs. They refer to Russia, but when it comes to China and the territories it has been able to successfully usurp by using illegal means, by using its power, should the West not be concerned about that as well? So please unmute yourself. So I'll just request you to log off and log in again because there seems to be an audio issue. I'll also request you to log in and click on that audio option that it shows you, that will allow you to have your audio disseminate clearly on our channel. But meanwhile, I have with me also Dr. Ravi Godse. Now Ravi, you've taken a look at these maps. This is not the first time we have discussed this. This is not going to be the last time. But it's a happy position to be in, that people are talking about it. There's dissemination of information worldwide, and it is important that we talk about it because finally it is the international organizations and countries worldwide who will have to take notice of it, acknowledge it, and then it can be created into a big issue like Ukraine war has been.
Well, to answer your question simply, the Western world just doesn't care about Tibet. If all of you were to go on your browsers right now and try and Google Tibet, soon as you type TIBE, the first suggestion that Google will give you is Tibetan Mastiff, a pet dog. That is the level of care that the world has about Tibet. And that's why after the Second World War, China conveniently took over Tibet. But
yeah, but that's why I keep hammering upon the point that this map, by spreading it, by telling people about it, by putting it on social media, an awareness can be created.
Of course, the awareness can be created. But I wanted to raise two separate points. One is, suppose you own a 2-bedroom apartment in Delhi and a thug comes and occupies it. What do? You go to Indian court. It's going to take 25 years to resolve the matter. In the meantime, the thug is going to show apartment as belonging to him on a map, and there's nothing you can do about it. So most of the times they say that the maps are drawn by the victors on the battlefield. Like Iraq was created by Churchill, who was a minister then, without giving any access to the Persian Gulf. It was just arbitrary, just a stroke of a pen that led to so many problems in the world. So like the court says, possession is half the law. If you are occupying that territory, say Russia cannot claim that in 1864, Alexander II sold Alaska to America. And he was a Tsar, he had no right to represent Russian people. Russia cannot go to US and say that give us back Alaska, which was sold not too long ago. But let's take a look at how China did it deceptively. When they took over Tibet, they said they will never build a high-speed rail. That was part of their agreement. But then they built the high-speed rail, and at like 100 miles per 200 kilometers per hour. Now anybody from mainland China can quickly reach Tibet, and they're assimilating Tibet into part of China. Now I just want to quickly raise a point, being a devil's advocate. Okay? Let's be diplomatic. Let's put ourselves in China's shoes and see what China is thinking, why China is so insistent about Tibet. And I'll give you a parallel example. Suppose Sri Lanka was to split into Tamilian Sri Lanka and Simhalese Sri Lanka and creating a Tamil state of Sri Lanka. India will be very nervous because Tamil Nadu in India may want to join this ethnic Tamil state across its border. Similarly, China has a huge ethnic Tibetan population that lies inside Chinese border. So if Tibet become independent, then this Tibetan population may want to join this Tibetan state. And that is China's nervousness. Means, of course, what they are is wrong. What they are doing is aggressive. But we have to be mindful of history and how it was done. Just one more quick point is we keep talking about Mongolia being not part of China. Just let us think. Let's take a look at the map. Why was the China wall, the Great Wall of China, built to the north of China? To keep Mongolians, the Huns, out, right? So if you look at the current map of China, you look at the Great Wall of China, the province of Inner Mongolia, which we keep saying was not part of China, lies to the south of Great China Wall. Why would China build a wall north of a territory that did belong to us by going into Mongolia? So again, what China is doing completely wrong. But we have to be mindful also of the history. We cannot take one-sided look at it. And the way to teach them is through economics, as to how we try and counter influence what they are trying to do in Tibet. Means like China was trying to keep Mongolia out. And as the previous speaker rightly pointed out, Yuan dynasty, 1278, they just took over entire China. The Qing dynasty, they were the Manchus. They really were not part of China. And they took over almost till 1911. And now if you look at China's position, I keep saying that India took over China in terms of population. There is one way that China can be the most populous nation in the world again, and that will lead to the Third World War. And that is China trying to occupy Republic of China, which is Taiwan. And that is the next burning crisis of the world.
Okay, yes, absolutely. And you know, all the focus at this point of time in South China Sea and the Indo-Pacific and the Quad being created, and there are these US and UK battleships that are at this point of time surveilling the South China Sea and the East China Sea, obviously brings us back to the focus that, this illegal usurping of territories is at this point of time a cause of concern, particularly with regards to the belligerence that has been shown by China across the globe is now at this time causing a lot of strife, not just to the ASEAN nations or India or Asia or Africa, but also to the Western nations. Quickly getting in, try to get in with us, Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni, if you can hear me again, and getting a comment from you as well. Now, has the time come finally that the West is looking up and taking notice and are not reluctant to take action against China, because it is hurting their economies, and Indo-Pacific is the new war zone? Okay, I'm sorry sir, but I'm not able to hear you. Problems after problem. We will try to figure that out. But Tenzin, again a question, like finally focus shifting to the Indo-Pacific, and are there hopes that there can be a resolution that can be drawn to allow for Tibetans to get back their land?
Definitely. Firstly, just wanted to contest the previous speaker. The Tibetan people are in Tibetan Plateau, which is 2.5 million square kilometers of land. There are no Tibetans in Chinese land. Tibet is the biggest plateau and the highest plateau in the world, and they live 4,000 meters above sea level. So there is no link between the Chinese land and the Tibetan land, distinctly geographically different. So there is no reason for China to feel that the what is called the Tibetans in China land would want to go back to Tibet. No, these are very separate places, just geographically so very distinct. Now, coming to your question, firstly, we are discussing China's cartographic attacks in the world. We are discussing this today. We are discussing this today because it is now affecting India. It's now affecting Malaysia, Vietnam, Indonesia, Taiwan, Brunei, Singapore, many countries. So they are now discussing because China is making this blatant cartographic attacks to different other countries. So it is affecting all these countries. We have been saying China has occupied Tibet, East Turkestan, Southern Mongolia, Manchuria for 70 years we've been saying, but no one cared about it. Yeah? So today it is becoming an issue because China is now becoming too much for Asia, for South Asia, and also for United States and in the West. United States for this year has issued introduced a bill to recognize Tibet's right to self-determination. India has started to talk about China's cartographic attacks and also rights to Tibetan people. And I think this awareness is building because many people, countries are affected by China's expansionist policy and also China's weaponization of its trade, its business, supply chains, as affecting so many different countries. Everybody is unhappy with China. They want to isolate China. So therefore, this attack on China is truly showing where China is, and that is an isolationist position.
Okay, all right. Jyota, coming back to you now, while there are bigger countries, while there is, as Tenzin rightfully mentioned, when it comes to Japan, when it comes to Taiwan, when it comes to Singapore, when it comes to the ASEAN nations, the likes of Vietnam, finally a protest is being raised. Finally, there is at this point in time an awareness that is being created that it is not just a recent phenomenon that China continues to mark its territories which are illegally being drawn by the way of these maps that China goes about publishing, but this has been a phenomenon that has been going on for the last, I don't know, it started off back in the 13th century.
Yeah, it's absolutely, you see, and you see this is what the Chinese, lying is all about. You know, as I mentioned in that earlier segment, that they create these points that okay, in this point of history we occupied this, and then they use that to justify what they are doing now. As a result of which, this latest map that has come out, the map that they have issued, it has irritated, angered every country. I mean, in the neighborhood, in the South China Sea neighborhood, in India's neighborhood, in terms of, as my co-panelists mentioned, India never ever shared a border with China. Now, for that, in place of that, what do we have now? We have, I think, nearly 4,000 kilometers of Chinese sitting on our borders, threatening to salami slice territory. And you see, this is the problem. Chinese, and you see, China is, it's not just about territorial, winning over territorially. It is how does China influence, it's about China's influence operations, which it is conducting 24/7. Now, if you look at that, what is called China's political warfare, it is about using your fault lines. Say, for example, in a democracy, it's using your institutions, it's about using your people from inside and try and weaken your country. Look at what is happening in the Solomon Islands. China is not fighting the war over there. It is the Solomon Islands Prime Minister, whatever, I'm forgetting his name, I'm sorry. He is the one who is doing China's bidding. If you go around, you see, but at the same time, you see, because of the way China is going around, because whenever China is going into country, it goes with a particular agenda, all right. So, sooner or later, that phase, that soft power phase, it goes in maybe within terms of medical ship. In fact, they had sent a medical ship to Solomon Islands recently, and which some of the people had really appreciated that effort. But sooner or later, the strategic part will come out, and basically China is trying to establish a military base there. Okay, and there are certain areas they have already tapped. So, there is a strategic angle to everything that they are doing. It is happening all over ASEAN, all the South China Sea countries. Tibet, of course, is, you know, they are already saying Tibet is part of China, and they are very serious about this one China policy. If anybody even tries to kind of, Tibet, Taiwan, these are the two regions China is extremely sensitive about. One China policy, one China principle. But at the same time, it is not going to respect any country's sovereign territories, sovereign claims to their own territory. So, how do you handle a bully like that? You build up yourself, You build up your economy, you build up your military power, and you show to the bully, you stand up to the bully and say, sorry, we are not going to take this nonsense from you.
Okay.
You know, that is why India is so important, because India is the only country that is standing up to China in this neighborhood. The other countries are getting irritated, but you see, that is why India's outreach to the South China Sea countries and all, it's so important, because together the democracies, and also some of them like Vietnam and all that are not democracies, together you have to stand up to China,
right,
along with the Western countries, and only then you can catch the bully and by the horn and ensure that it never ever dares to threaten anyone.
Okay. Coming to Sumit Pair, who's just joined me on the telecast. And Sumit, as Joyita mentioned, it is not just the South China Sea. Now, expansionist tendencies of China have reached far and wide. Whether it is the Indian subcontinent, we take a look at South Africa and what has happened, we take a look at Nepal, we take a look at Africa, we take a look at the Caribbean nations, we take a look at the South American nations. So this is happening. This is a debt trap diplomacy that China plays. This is the salami slicing that China has been practicing for several years now. Now, in such a situation, how can India stand up to China? You know, we already have our conflict when it comes to Arunachal Pradesh, we have our conflict when it comes to Aksai Chin and Ladakh, and how is it, while we are fighting our own wars, how can India showcase solidarity with the rest of the nations who are under the clutches of China?
Megha ji, thank you very much for having me on your show. In fact, what Joyita ji said, I completely endorse her point. India is the only country who has stood up to China. China understands only the bhasha or the language of power. Only power can ensure peace. That is what the Honorable Prime Minister has said. That is what the Honorable External Affairs Minister has said. So you have to keep on building your power. You have to keep on getting more and more people with you. Your country has to be seen as a liberator, not a tight trapper. For example, today the African Union head says that India is a bigger superpower than China. This is the head of the African Union. You got African Union into G20, they're indebted towards you. The African Union had said that in Africa, there is more than Africa, there is space for Indians today. India has invested so much of money. We have invested almost equivalent amount of money in Africa. We are getting 25 African nations out of debt traps. We are helping to bring agriculture there. We are giving them technology. We are getting the mainstream. Their kids come and study here. Yet we have more than 800 projects going in more than 80 countries, and there is not one case of debt trapping. Today, for example, I take of Ethiopia. In Ethiopia, the agriculture production has got 10 times after Indians have started, helping them with the agriculture. Now, our banks, our UPI, our telemedicine, everything is getting there. And let's not forget, India was the first country which gave Africa a pan-African communication network. So when you do these things which are enabling people, which are liberating their problems, which are solving their problems, what you get support? You get support of the people. And when you get support of the people, you might be a dictator, you might be a communist or a democratic or whatever your regime is, you are bound to look at the mood of the people. Today, the mood of the people in Africa is we are pro-Indians. Today, the mood of in Africa is India is our brother. History was made in G20 when it was made G21. This will go on the sands of time till eternity. So when you keep on doing these things, who has eradicated HIV? Who is the pharmacy of the world? We control 33% of the food grains of the world, yet we are not weaponizing it. We have not weaponized even one of the aspects which we bring to the table in helping the world. Why are people coming to us to give, help them get out of these debt traps of China? China's importance, China's name and credibility is down the drain. You see how much of our respect we are getting today. TVS and Bajaj are the highest selling motorcycles in Africa. So many Chinese companies have closed shop. Now for EVs, again, people are looking to us. For all of their needs, the whole of Africa is looking to us. Look at the Middle East, the kind of trust we've got in Middle East. Look at this India, Middle East, Europe, America corridor which we have built. This is the biggest ever thing which could have happened from a G20, and the people are really going crazy about it.
Yeah.
You see, 4 continents, people are going crazy about it. And in this road, everybody will be building his part and everybody will get the revenue from his own part. We are not asking, bhai, hame zameen de do and we'll do a kabza on that. No. We are just giving the idea, we are giving the initiative. Even if you talk of INSST, mainstreaming Iran, getting it passed through Russians and making it reach Mumbai, we have already done that. While on the contrary, BRI was a concept, old concept of medieval kingdom, which was just there to debt trap people and get hold of their land by hook and crook. You see, now Italians have moved out of it. Many more countries will start talking against it. So typically the intention of karma determines the outcome of karma. India is strengthening itself. We are getting more aircrafts, we are getting more carriers and all. So it is the economic strength, it is diplomatic strength, and it is the military strength.
Okay.
And expose the design of these Chinese to the whole world. Let the world know what is the difference between a liberator and a predator. That is the importance.
Okay, okay, all right. Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni, if you can hear me now, and if you could add your inputs to this discussion. Okay, I've tried for the third time and we've still not been able to fix his audio. There is a problem. I don't know how to manage this, but also, okay, coming back to Major General Sudhakar ji. Now we talk about specifically this grand plan of building the India, Middle East, Europe corridor, this rail and port corridor that is the talk of the town, versus this being touted as a counter to the BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative of the Chinese. There are two different concepts. The Belt and Road Initiative wants to build a Silk Road, wants to take more control of territories, showcase China's power, while the Middle East, India, Europe corridor is being used as a peaceful process to have physical connectivity, to have digital connectivity as well, to allow for trade to prosper in all these nations. Can the world then, at this point in time come together, expose China for what it is?
Hit the nail on its head, bang on. I would compliment you for raising this particular question. It's not indirectly, it's a direct kind of a not messaging or response to China. Enough is enough. You please mend your ways. Behave yourself as a responsible, growing global power. If you don't do that, if you push India, particularly with the kind of leadership we have today, he is the last man to take it lying. He will give it back nice and properly. We have done enough of surgical strike with our neighbors to the west and the east. There are different types of surgical strikes which are being undertaken today, which makes China actually go into jitters, eternal jitters. Today, this map itself is a manifestation of China's frustration. This China, the Xi Jinping not coming for G20 is actually a manifestation of he doesn't know how to save his face. And this corridor that you are talking of, it is a people-friendly corridor based on a golden historical alignment along which we used to have trading and commercial activities with Europe. In good old days, people said 2000, 3000, sorry, you go to the best of historians, I'm sure Sumit is the most knowledgeable person going around, 8,000 years back, India as a subcontinent, as a civilization, is to have those historical and commercial activities with Europe. You pick up one or names of the rivers of Europe, you will find the Sanskrit name there. Go to Kenya, you will find the Sanskrit names in Kenya, the villages. Go to Tibet. We talk about the Tibet, that is the core issue. Tibet today, when you read Ramayana, you find the battle of Ramayana or Mahabharata particularly has been orchestrated from the land of Tibet. The names of the villages, they are all Hindustani names. So coming back to the question which you are asking, BRI, which has tried to penetrate into the West Asia and debt trap the countries, there is a direct response from India in collaboration with like-minded countries like US, you have Saudi Arabia, you have UAE, you have Italy, France, Germany, etc., etc. We have directly told China, please put a stop to all this. And on top of it, like Sumit very nicely brought out, Italy has already opted out. Sumit or Joyita, I think, brought up. Italy has opted out. So this is not a quick answer. It is not going to happen overnight. My recommendation to you is that because your channel is an international channel, it is being watched all over the world over. It is a very substantive channel. This has to be tackled in a multi-pronged manner. China has crossed the water level of every Indian citizen has gone beyond the nose. Time has come wherein we need to give it back. We are standing up for everything that China is doing post 1962. All right. We need to give it back in cartographic warfare. We need to give it back in information warfare. We need to give it back in every possible CNP form. When I say it is comprehensive national power of China to include political, economic, intelligence, military, you have psychological, you have the three warfares.
Okay. All right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, get your point. Jyoti, quickly, you want to make a point?
Yeah, I want to make a quick point about BRI. You see, one of the reasons or the primary reason why BRI is a failure is because India is not part of it. Without India's economic heft, what is China going to move down those roads and infrastructure it is building? Because all the countries that are part of the BRI are all either bankrupt or economically very, very weak. Okay, so when it comes to in terms of this particular corridor or the BRI network to be successful, you need economically robust countries to be part of it, because without their presence you cannot have a corridor, and now Italy is also out of it. So, if you look at this region, what is the state of BRI in BRI, which is also, offshoot, CPEC is also an offshoot of BRI. What is the status? Half the projects are not completed. Now, the thing is, it's the same situation in all the smaller distant countries, because they are just not in a position to sustain that particular network that China is trying to push. So, BRI is bound to fail because fundamentally flawed. India is not part of it. The reason why this other corridor that we have come up with, IMEC, will prosper and do very well, because it is India that is at the center of it, and it has got the backing of the US and the West in general.
Absolutely. Getting back Dr. Ravi Godse on the telecast with me. Now, Ravi, what's interesting to note is that CPEC, that is part of the BRI project, and China has built a number of infrastructure for investment. It has built its military bases in GWADAR, aiming directly at India with the border that is adjoining India at this point of time with GWADAR and Balochistan. It's interesting to note that America has showcased renewed interest in it. There has been the American envoy to Pakistan who has now visited GWADAR in Balochistan. He has expressed his desire and his country's desire to build trade associations, to have trade ties, to have commercial ties with GWADAR, to set up its investment plans. So there you have it, the hegemony of China, which it until now thought is going to help itself in take up these territories of Pakistan by its Belt and Road Initiative, by CPEC, are also being thwarted.
Yes, of course. And if you look at GWADAR, it's a very deep water port and right across from Oman. So very historically important. It used to be belonging to Oman for a long, long time, just recently came to Pakistan. I think India is the only nation who can morally tell China not to do this. Means United Kingdom, France, Belgium, Spain cannot tell China, go and occupy, you cannot go and occupy other people's territory and assimilate them into yours, because these countries have had big colonial empires. India is the only country that can tell China not to do this. But I have a very interesting take on this whole thing. Now this GWADAR is in Balochistan, right? So we can keep talking about it, or we can do something. If like the previous speaker was saying, if the time has come to do something, I had an idea that would create a diplomatic firestorm all over the world. The Western media, their reporting for G20 was Xi Jinping is not attending. That cannot be a headline of a G20 that India is hosting. India's response could have been, oh, Xi Jinping has not come. We didn't even notice. We didn't realize that he had not come. So just downplay it totally. But India invited African Union to be a member. Now that's a good gesture, but who's going to say no? Means European Union, America, Canada, nobody is
No,
going
but
to
at
say
the end
no.
of the day, it
If-
also builds heft for India as the voice of the global
Of
south,
course,
and not
of
just the
course,
voice of
of course.
global south. In terms of the Chinese at this point in time, looking at the African territories to grow their strength, to grow their territories over there. Again, a counter that India has placed and very well received by the G20 nations.
Sure. No, I completely understand. And I've said this is the diplomatic masterstroke because it doesn't cost Indian taxpayers anything. African Union, those 55 nations are eternally grateful to us. It doesn't cost us and everybody is happy. But my idea is, in addition to asking African Union to join G20, had India asked members of Tibet and Taiwan and Balochistan to come to G20 as delegates, that would have created a diplomatic news cycle that would have dominated the world for 1 week.
No, that's an interesting aspect. I don't know how applicable it would have been in reality. I mean, we're speaking. Of course, there are comments that are made with regards to how the reality of then getting back our territories of Pakistan-occupied Kashmir and Gilgit-Baltistan is soon going to be a reality. So that's something we are working on. But to be putting Balochistan and be putting Galwan, beg your pardon, not Galwan, to be putting GWADAR on the same page as G20 is something of a stretch of imagination. But okay, all right. Tenzin wants to make a point.
What he was saying, we did propose that Tibetans could be either a delegate or at least observers, but it was not respected. I also want to respond to the previous speaker. India and Tibet shares civilizational relationships, especially culture, language, many other things. But there is no story of Mahabharata and Ramayana in Tibet. Important point I want to conclude this is China's revisionist policy, looking at China's history and also physically occupying Manchuria, Eastern Pakistan, Southern Mongolia and Tibet, and then selling this to the Western world who are continuing to buy cheap made in China products and also making them agree to this position of what is called one China policy. This is how we have landed in this situation today. Even today, the 2008 India's expression that Tibet Autonomous Region is a part of People's Republic of China, it is not been set up after 2008, but that statement still lingers. India still recognizes Tibet as a part of Tibet Autonomous Region as a part of People's Republic of China. So it is time now for all the affected people, countries to speak up and say Tibet was a free and independent country. And just as all the speakers have said that India's border in the Himalayas was with Tibet and is with Tibet because we have Indo-Tibetan Border Police and Indo-Tibetan Border Force. We have a reason to say this. So we have to get back to this. And my hope is तिब्बत की आजादी भारत की सुरक्षा. एक बार तिब्बत आजाद हो जाएगा और भारत और तिब्बत के बीच में वो जो भाईचारा का रिश्ता है वो फिर से कायम हो जाएगा.
जी बिल्कुल, absolutely. Major General Sudhakar ji, I'll come to you, yes, and then I'll come to you, Sumit, just to hold on your thought.
The chance to Sumit is filled with all knowledge. Okay, I would like to compliment Tenzing. I think he's speaking everyone's heart and mind. The soul of India lies in his articulation. That is what exactly the modern democracy or the modern in 21st century. There is no scope of transgressing into the territorial integrity or violating the sovereignty of a nation. The G20 has given a message loud and clear globally. Without having taken the name of Russia in the master document or the declaration, that please put a stop to this, invading into a neighbor, disregarding the sovereignty and the territorial integrity. This is a message as much to the China as that of Russia, without having taken the name of Russia. Russia is an evergreen friend. But having said that, what I would like to come to is that Tenzing has made very significant points, and so has the previous co-panelists. I think there is a lot of substance in both of them, what they're saying. But I would like to sum it, Megha, only one line. That G20 was a litmus test of the capability of Indian diplomacy, Indian political leadership, Indian military might, and the negotiating skills. Had we taken the name of Balochistan or say Tibet and so on, because India is good to go a long way. If we preempt certain things, if we actually do certain things before proving our capability and asserting our authority in the world order, perhaps it would have backfired in my opinion. Therefore, let things go in a natural form. Everything will fall in place. Tibet is going to be liberalized. If I am saying this as a soldier, sooner or later, Tibet will be liberated by somebody in the world order. Back to you, Megha.
Okay, all right. Quickly then getting you on board, Sumit, for a quick closing comment.
Megha ji, quite a few points. I'll be very fast. First of all, on this NewsX, I would like to announce, let's call it not LAC, Indo-Tibetan Border Frontier. That's the first name we should give it. There's nothing called LAC now. Bhul jao LAC ko. Point number 2, what we have shown to the world. You see, it was BRICS, it was SCO, it was considered a China show. Now, Putin could not come because of the reasons known to us. She did not come, but the world has moved on. The world has moved on without China. If this is not the diplomatic snub you can give to China, there is not a bigger thappad you can give to the China. In diplomacy, it is said if you are not on the table, you are on the menu. And that is what has been proved right. So if somebody is not on the table, he ends up on the menu. That's been proved right. President Joe Biden was saying it's a big deal, it's a big deal, it's a big deal. The biggest ever initiative is getting African Union into it. African Union is what, 55 countries, 60% of the total cultivable land of the world, wherein only 10% is cultivated. Ample resources, minerals, markets, civilization. You're going to come one big complete civilization into it and make G20 to G21. China is not there. We don't want you to be there. 83, these paragraphs, not a one, no footnote, no disagreement. Ukraine mentioned 4 times, Russia not even mentioned 1 time, every agreement. Now, if you talk about the greatest initiative, that is this corridor, it is about connectivity, it is about liquid hydrogen, it is about electricity, it's about internet, it is about gas, and it is about petroleum. So it will be a multimodal, not only a transport corridor like BRI, it will be a multimodal economic corridor where a lot of these things will happen. And let me tell you, ma'am, China has been trying to talk about BRI for 15 years. They have put $1.5 trillion, which is literally down the drain today. And China is going to default on this money. It's a matter of time. And as far as POJK is concerned, recently, General VK Saab told one thing. POJK or GP to khud aayega, aap dekhte rahiye. So we are doing whatever has to be done. And Tibet's liberation is on our cards because Tibet has to be liberated, it will be liberated, and India is the only country जिसकी औकात, हिम्मत और वक़्त है तिब्बत को liberate करने की. ये होके रहेगा. The one China policy is not sustainable. Look at China's nuclear submarines going missing in Yellow Sea, breaking into pieces. Yeah. Look at Inner Mongolia radioactive leak. This radioactive leak is going into the whole of China now. And look at how many people are suffering from these ulcer and radiation disease. And the third point is havoc in the Chinese economy. And I came to know that the Emperor of China has stopped taking the plane. He's going from one part of the China to another part in a train. It is exactly what Kim Jong-un used to do because he feared that somebody might assassinate him. If it is true, then something is grossly wrong. And what a snub. The world has moved
Absolutely.
on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You're absolutely right, Sumit. I'm out of time, but thank you all for joining me on the telecast. And thank you for watching NewsX.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.